Hey, I'm here. Hold on. I'll be right there. Hold on.
And the big question of the night, if this is all that's left, why would people want to live here instead of in any of these neighboring cities? It's time to start seeing open space as our ticket to remaining relevant. It's time to start seeing open space as our highest valued asset, not as a reserve for developers to dip into. Open space keeps us relevant. It keeps property values high, right? Take Central Park in New York City. What are the most, or this space is worth a lot of money, but New York City recognizes that the value of having the space exceeds the value of selling it, right? And guess what? The highest valued places are the ones that border the park. Open space creates a sense of place. Serves as a hub for the community to go to and to meet each other and talk and be neighbors. And it gives people a reason to stay. So let's take inventory of all of our assets, right? In Newcastle County, we have rocks and woods. We have the Piedmont. We have these cities or these small towns that are and walkable communities that are nearby. We have hiking trails. We have biking trails in Middle Run and Newark. We have this rich history that we never talk about. Let's tell our story. Did you know Old Newcastle is older than Philadelphia? Right? Let's tell that story. We have so many assets. Anyone been here? Hagley Museum. This is where it all started, right? It's beautiful and it's historic. How about here, Brandywine Creek State Park? Is there anything like this in other cities? Look at these trails. You just don't see this anywhere else. These are our greatest assets. And what we have that no one else has is the combination of open space and the connectivity to other cities. Let's not blow it. So we have lots of opportunities, right? If we start preserving open space, we can install different mountain biking trails. There's different types of mountain biking. I don't know how many people knew that. There's skills, there's dirt jumping, there's slope style. There's different types of water sports, kayaking and canoeing. There's different types of climbing. There's top roping. There's bouldering, which bouldering just needs like a boulder and you climb that. These are cheap ways to attract people here. And we can start installing infrastructure left and right. I went to this place in Lancaster on a cold March day a year or so ago. And this was a rails to trails line that Lancaster abandoned at some point, but they recognized that this cliff is a perfect place to create climbing opportunities. And you can walk down this dirt path for a mile and you'll see people climbing every 10 feet from each other the whole way down. There were 100 people there that day on that cold day out along this old rail line. And why were they there? To climb this rock, right? We have opportunities like this right here in our state. Currently, we have one climbing facility, one outdoor climbing space in our entire state. That's it. But we have lots of rocks and we have lots of opportunities to install, just put some hooks and, suddenly people come. I took a walk around the backside of Rockford Tower, and there's lots of boulders laying there from when they were building it. And climbers or boulderers had found these places and climb on it. And you could tell because if you look around, you see chalk marks all over the place where people dip their hands in the chalk and then hold the rocks. People want it. They're looking for it. And they found it even though we didn't create anything for them. Imagine if we put some energy into making this more accessible and then advertising that it's here. People love our parks and support expanding them. We have the political will to make this happen. Here's a cold March day where people are just out, filling the parks. The Newcastle County Land Preservation Task Force did a survey, and they found that when asked, are you willing to pay more in county taxes for land preservation, 85% said yes. So how do we do this? There's 4 things. First, we want to incentivize density. Density is a good thing. It prevents sprawl and it creates walkable communities and economic efficiencies. Central Park next to New York City is a great example of density, right? Rather than filling the park with houses, they created density around it and preserve the open space. Next, we want to rapidly preserve land. Land is cheap, but it's disappearing quickly. And it's the cheapest it's ever going to be. It will never be cheaper than it is today. Let's plan for 10 years out, 50 years out, and 100 years out for areas that are less populated now that we anticipate will be more populated in the future. Let's buy up this open space while we still can. Let's increase funding to our parks and expand them. Parks foster a sense of place and community and stewardship and a healthy lifestyle. This is the low-hanging fruit. The infrastructure is already there. Let's just make it even better. And finally, let's foster a development mentality of quality over quantity. So when we do develop, let's do it in a way that creates value out of the quality, not low value community sprawl. We want walkable communities, and we want to give people a place to, or a reason to stay. So this we need to start seeing open space preservation as an economic driver, not a developable opportunity. When you frame it this way, instead of, hey, let's save the trees, open space preservation is an obvious choice. It leads to small business economic development. It serves as an attraction for the budding tech sector. It creates pride in your area, ends urban blight, fuels historic preservation and the creation of community gardens because people care about where they live. And open space makes way for an economic and cultural renaissance. So just some closing thoughts here is that Delaware can be a place that's unlike anywhere else. In fact, it already is different from everything else around it. Let's emphasize our strengths, not try to be like everyone else around us. Let's use our open space as an economic driver and as a way to create state pride, to create a strong sense of place and a reason to stay. We can attract more people from the tech sector, attract younger workers who can move here and start families, and create high community areas. If we don't focus on preserving open space, we're going to lose the greatest thing that makes Delaware a place to be somebody. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What a great idea, as opposed to let's feed the developers. And I have to salute Dee, who led the charge for the Hold On to Hercules effort, which I think the COVID kind of put the death knell on. And I live right across the way, and it just pains me every time I drive through there that there wasn't the foresight in our government to see that as a wonderful opportunity to have just open space. Questions, thoughts, reactions, responses to Jason's thoughts?
Yeah, I'd love to just, open a discussion and hear what you all have to say.
Sandy, do you want to, I can't read and
Okay, I'll just read my question.
Yeah, please.
My concerns. And I understand that we are in a prime area between Philly, New York, and Baltimore and Washington. But traffic in Newcastle County, I think, is a real problem. And if we bring people in, what are you going to do with the old developments? Are you going to tear them down and do something else with that? And the other thing is, we're promoting electric. And maybe new developments are underground, but we've got a lot of electric lines that are above underground. And and I don't know, is new development underground? Maybe that's apart from this discussion, but
Anyone else feel free to hop in. This can just be a discussion.
Oh, to the electric question, I would just say, I think most new developments nowadays do bury their wires. The question is, how do we get existing wires buried? And Delmarva says it's not economically, doesn't make sense economically, because it drives me crazy as well, Sandy. But to your first question, though, like as far as Newcastle County goes, and it's probably even worse in Sussex and Kent, the developers are building because our zoning allows it, and we aren't, especially in Newcastle County, preserving land is more expensive. So the Open Space Council doesn't spend as much money up in Newcastle County as it does in the other counties, just because land is cheaper down there. But that's not quite fair to Newcastle County, where the population is, and sort of negates Jason's argument. But bottom line is that our current zoning, allows a lot of development. The developers are just going to keep building unless we change that. So the question is, how do we change that? And I guess one question I have for all of you is, or for Jason is, listening to your talk tonight, like, what can we all do to make a difference in Delaware? The three counties are responsible for land use. The state is also responsible for preservation of open space. And there are other entities, private nonprofits, that are doing preservation as well. But, how can we all help put pressure or encouragement to make your argument and get more land preserved?
Sure. Well, tonight I just wanted this to be the idea that we can all coalesce around. Say this is our vision for the state, right? It starts there. And in terms of legislation, there's other states are doing smart development practices that are being legislated, and that incentivizes density and does it in a way that's fair and equitable to all the people living there. So, there's a lot we can do in terms of creating the right rules and regulations around developing. If you think about it, a lot of the developing is when you develop urban sprawl, it's an externalized cost, right? The people living there and the developers aren't bearing the true cost. And if we can do a better job of internalizing those costs, then the incentives change entirely. To answer Sandy's question about traffic, what causes traffic is commuters, right? And why do people commute? Because we have these cheap houses that are being developed downstate. They want to live there, work upstate. And if we can find a way to increase density in our developments, then you'll have fewer commuters. You'll have more people living closer to where they work.
okay.
When I see the sprawl and the pictures of all these little houses all jammed together, I can't help but think, if the developer would put those houses one on top of the other, and then the land that normally would be spread out with all these houses would become a park, then people living in these high rises would be able to go and wander around this beautiful park rather than worry about the neighbors close by. And, you know, these close by neighbors, they always have some way to fuss about each other. But if you're in a high rise, they're not as obvious. And the economic interest stays the same. You've got as many people in as many houses paying as much tax
Square
up
footage.
high.
Right,
So,
that's a good point, Ted. And that's one of the practices that we want to encourage. Instead of homogenizing the distribution of development, you want to move everyone into one area and keep the other area open. But currently, we don't have any incentives to do that. Linda, I think you have to unmute.
Well, I would like to comment that one of the problems we have is that we build and overbuild roads for commuters. And then we wonder why development happens and sprawl happens. It's really being subsidized by the taxpayers, and the taxpayers who live in the communities that then lose their tax base because of the sprawl that they've actually induced by building the commuter roads to allow people to commute out of the community and use the community as a source of wealth for themselves. So I think all of us should be very skeptical about any proposals to increase the capacity of commuter roads in our communities.
I think that's a good point as well. I live in the suburban sprawl that's along Route 48 and 41 all the way out to Pennsylvania. And commuting happens from Pennsylvania all the way in town. And the Hercules Golf Course is on that road. And I honestly did not realize that it was going to be developed. But there are several parcels not much farther out that I have seen signs also indicating that development is happening. One of the good things about the area near where I live, there's a Pike Creek area that has developments of various that were large tracts that included open space. And it continually, or not continually, but is from time to time proposed to be filled in. And part of what we need to do is to campaign for the open space we have and use that as the driver to fuel your ideas of denser and closer. And I think that's a good plan. I'm not sure about high rises, however.
Can I chime in with a thought?
Please
Please.
do.
Sorry, I may have missed some of the conversation, so some of this might have already been discussed. I wanted to say I love the ideas as you presented them today. That this was really cool to attend. I also started thinking about how, because things are half spread out and half close together, like I always think about how our regional SEPTA rail could be more efficient, but there are so many commuters that people don't tend to use it as often as they could. And so the SEPTA doesn't run as frequently, which means people are less likely to take it. But if population density was redistributed and increased a little bit, people might tend to take the SEPTA more. They might schedule more trips back and forth between, like the Newark and Philadelphia area. And that could definitely reduce the amount of traffic jams that we face on a daily basis on I-95. So this, redistribution of people and people's priorities is definitely something I could see having a direct and visible impact if we all are aware and advocate for ourselves and each other. So that's, like an immediate example that comes to mind. And I wanted to point out, I saw Michael's comment about our retirees and millennials looking for the same features in a community.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting because to me, I am a young millennial, like at the, I guess, almost Gen Z. And I live in an apartment. And it would be wonderful if I could have, a garden of my own. But practically speaking, I've driven through like the Middletown area before, plenty of times, and I see all of these large McMansions being constructed, and I feel like the development companies are trying to build something for an audience that is no longer the audience that will appreciate what they're doing. So like, I'm never going to be able to afford a large house with the way the economy is, nor do I want something that's big and so spacious with so little green space around it. I would be happy in a tiny house, like in a community cottage village with like, everybody has their own little tiny house and we're all together. And then we have our own little shared garden spaces. That's more of my speed. And I think a lot of people are also probably in this chat of a similar mind, but there's a trajectory that all of this development is on where they're taking the nice green space and converting it into sad gray space, and no one's going to use it, or very few people will buy it all out and then charge other people to use it without fostering a sense of community. So thinking about that is, I don't know, from a retiree perspective, what people are looking for, but I know from my perspective, that's certainly not the development that's taking away our green spaces right now is certainly not what myself and other people in my age group seem to want. So those are my thoughts.
Great thoughts, Emma.
Yeah. Judy, you have your hand up, and then maybe Cheryl, you have your question or a comment?
So I'm so into like regional rail, light rail, better building practices. And I guess my main question is, do we have any regulations around new buildings that make them greener and denser and have to have open space? It seems like just developers are the boss. So I would love to understand the building trades better and perhaps put more regulations on them, make it harder for them to do what they're doing.
Dee or Jason, do you have a comment about that?
I think Dee might be able to speak to that best.
I think that's probably a whole conversation we could go on for hours, but yeah, I'm right there with you, Judy. That's part of what I'm trying to do with the help of some of my colleagues in Newcastle County. Anyway, I can't speak for the other two counties, but it's difficult. We could talk for hours about it, but it's very difficult. The developers, for one thing, give campaign contributions, and they are very practiced at the system. The system encourages development, and it's turning around. We need to turn around the Titanic, and it's difficult. We have lots of ideas, but your elected officials need to hear from you about this. And that's one thing that you all can do. And your county council people, whichever county you're in, your state officials, make sure they support more funding for open space at the state level. And the county officials are the ones in charge of land use, and they need to hear from you that the old way of land use is just not acceptable.
Great. And this is to jump in here. This is something that starts with the story, right? The story here is that we understand that open space is not just this save the trees thing, right? This is something that is so necessary for a state to be relevant in the future, right? And this is something that anybody, regardless of where you stand politically, can agree with, because it just makes sense. And there can be political will if we keep talking about it. And once there's political will, then it will happen.
Hey, so my name is Cheryl Siskin. I actually have my master's in planning and worked as a planner in Fairfax County in the 80s when it started taking off. I had presentations from Andre Zawani when they first started the new town concept, which is finally sort of materializing here in Delaware. I say this not to brag or anything, just to let you know that I have some credentials in this area. I wrote my master's thesis on pedestrian pathway design. I live in Rehoboth, right on the trail. I can't imagine a more beautiful place to live and appreciate. And I fight, I'm on Sierra Club and all this stuff. And this is a tidal shift that was anticipated. So people knew this was coming, that young people want to live in these high-rise apartments in these happening little areas with stuff to do, with their friend group, all live together. And, you know, a couple of them work from home and a couple of them commute or whatever. I'm sure we all know these 20 somethings, right? It's changing everything. But meanwhile, we have a housing stock that exists. And it would be terrible to just let it fall into the abyss because we don't like single family zoning anymore. So we have to shift the Titanic, as Dee was saying. So one of the things I've given a lot of thought to, and I really think the next step is to allow for multi-families to live in single family dwelling units. Just allow people to start converting their houses. And to see it's not the end of the world. Use the existing infrastructure. Don't disturb any more open space. We've already wrecked enough. That's my 2 cents worth.
Well, there comes a point when when the land becomes valuable enough that it makes sense to demolish a single family home and turn it into something greater, right? You see a lot of that happening in Newark, right? The college came in and these little homes that maybe were 1 or 2 bedrooms are now getting knocked down and turned into denser development, which makes
Right, long wait. It's a long wait.
a long
And
way.
I know so many single people that live in single family dwellings, like whole houses. It's ridiculous. We have to change the way we look at things and realize that land is precious. And, you know, not to get too crazy about open space and stuff,
Right.
but I think we've messed up enough, and there's actually plenty of roads that run along places and infrastructure that runs along that we could build housing and factories and whatever, communities all over the country. I drove all over this summer, trust me.
Audrey, you've had your hand up for a while.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to echo Jason's really good point about what a lot of valuable open space we do have. I live in Newcastle County, and we have a network of some of them are county parks and some of them are state parks. And I'm sure that probably some of the people here are responsible for why we have so many, but you can go from, you know, Valley Garden Park and the area up near Auburn to, you know, Walter Carpenter State Park, Brandywine Creek State Park, Brandywine Springs Park, Carousel Park, Judge Morrison's estate, the Bellevue, Del Castle for people who want like more, you know, paved kind of recreation, but the area behind the golf course across the street from that has beautiful trails too that weave between developments and are, you know, nice and nobody uses them. Judge Morris Park, like they're all over the place, so that it is, to me, you know, a wonderful place to be. And I've, you know, had my own run-ins with the developer land use zoning commission, but right now we do still have some really wonderful places.
Great, thank you, Audrey.
Yeah, Jason, I was, you said that I think money drives. You know, it's wonderful to be a tree hugger. But you know, money drives. How do you said the costs are really externalized, all these developments, the costs are externalized. And you know, people are kind of told that you need a single family house with a yard and a picket fence. And, you know, nobody says, oh, you know, get your own condo. And those externalized costs, how do we make the developers and, you know, the buyers of, I guess, those homes, you know, bear the actual costs? So it's not, you know, the old folks who've already lived here.
Well, I think that really comes down to what our zoning laws are, right? A lot of times, excuse me, a lot of times developers are required to put in additional lines, utilities and things like that. And I'm not the expert. I think Dee would be able to answer the specifics a lot better, but it really comes down to what is the developer incentivized to do? Are they, right now, it's easier to build on open space because that's the cheapest way to do it, right? When you get to a point where all the open space is gone and you still need to build, where do you build? Well, then you start taking lots and you subdivide them, or you say, hey, you know, we're going to demolish a single family home and put in a larger unit because that is the most cost effective way to make money. And that's starting to happen in Denver right now. Single family homes are being turned into larger single family homes, even, you know, on the outside of the city. I don't want to be anti single family home. You know, I think Trolley Square area is a really good example of where it works well. There are lots of homes with picket fences, right? But they're still walkable communities. So it really comes down to, do you need your car to get places or not? And we can take a look at what other places are doing, because you know, we don't have to figure this out on our own. It's already been solved for us. Let's look at other places that are doing it right? That's where the answers are. So I don't want us to feel helpless. I want us to feel like, hey, the answer's right there. It exists and we can do it. We just need to have the right conversations. I see Jeanette Robinson has had her hand up for a while.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, there's so many things that I wanted to say, but I'll try to make it brief. I guess the big thing is that I certainly agree with Jill about the money. You know, it's about the money, and I was taken by your because the developers are going to make a lot of money. Obviously, how do you stop them when they have a chance to make a lot of money? How are you going to stop that? So one of the things that you said was the developers don't pay the ultimate cost or something like that. And I'm not sure exactly what you meant. Are you talking about, because to me, how I interpret it is the cost to me, from what I've seen, I live in a condominium along the Brandywine in Wilmington. And I've seen about 600 new homes, townhouses, condominiums, all the way down from where I am to Rockford Park. There's practically no space left along the Brandywine anymore. They're all houses, and they even dumped a whole bunch of dirt to build these on so they could look down. But anyway, so there's a tremendous cost for me as far as dirt from the construction. It's been going on for years and it's still going on. Noise from the construction, which is horrible. Traffic, which is horrible. I'm afraid to walk my dog out here because of all the increased traffic. And this used to be a very, very quiet street with a dead end, no dead end. It goes into these hundreds of houses. So that's one thing. But I think what we need to do is look at the zoning laws. And I guess we need to talk more to Dee about that. How do we know, like, for example, what is planned? This happened, I had no idea that was going to happen. I had lived here about 10 years in this condo, and all of a sudden this is happening. And I'm thinking, how could they, who said they could do that? So we need to know where the development is happening, and then maybe organize and talk to people the way you are, Jason, about, reasonable, sensible things about what we value. And there's tons of studies that say that just being around trees adds to your well-being and your sense of happiness and contentment. And we don't have very many trees around here anymore. And so once we know what's going on with the zoning, can we then organize and talk to people and know who our council person is or whoever we're supposed to contact, because this shouldn't happen. And I've talked to a lot of my neighbors who are very unhappy about the new construction. And we've got this huge high-rise building right opposite my balcony that blocks my sun. So now I can't even grow vegetables on the balcony. But anyway, I'm rambling. But I'm glad you brought up the point where you said the developers and the owners don't bear the real cost. And I don't know if my interpretation was what you meant, but can somebody comment on that, please?
That's exactly what I meant.
Okay, that's what I, okay.
And that's one example of it, and there's many more. The idea that the cost to build the home is not the true cost.
Right.
There's everybody pays for it in terms of now you have more people commuting, right? So everybody sits in traffic longer. Everybody pays the cost in terms if they do any road developments, right? Everybody pays the cost in terms of loss of open space. And everybody pays the cost in having to subsidize utilities to get there, because it's, when you have a dense area, it makes more economic sense to provide utilities. When everyone's spread out, then the numbers just don't work anymore, but we still have to provide residents utilities. And so these costs are being borne by everyone else who already lives in the state, right? And it shows up in so many forms, whether it's traffic, recreation, ability to grow your vegetables on your porch, right? All of those things are true costs.
There's been studies done, and this is one of the things Jason and I talked about a year or so ago, and I still hope to put together sort of a summit to take his idea and explore it further. But for instance, Chester County has done studies on the economic value of preservation and the cost of development, and many other locations have as well, and the National Farmland Program, and they've proven financially, looking at the data, that open space preservation is the lowest form of cost for taxpayers of land use. And the only other next closest form of land use that doesn't cost the taxpayers more than just leaving the land alone is age-restricted communities, because the folks that move into those, say from out of state, which Delaware is getting a lot of transfers from New York and New Jersey, who are moving into our age-restricted communities because the taxes are lower here. But the age-restricted communities obviously don't send kids to school. They don't drive as much, so not as much impact to our roads and whatnot, but it's still not, a zero-sum game. So like Jason said, the highest and best use for our land is preserved land. And that's not the way most elected officials and obviously developers look at it. They literally define highest and best use of land as developed land. And,
Right.
and we need to turn that on its head and flip that around using a lot of the arguments that Jason has used tonight and others.
Because that is the reality, is that the land is not the least value, it's the most value.
Mhm.
And the caveat is that it has to be accessible by the residents for recreational value. So, you know, I think I have had a long history of being on the other side, where I'm trying to say, hey, I know that this doesn't make economic sense, or right, but we need to preserve this land, right? And that's a tough argument. But when you flip it around and say, hey, look, it makes the most economic sense to develop this, or sorry, to preserve this, sorry, then it's very easy to swallow argument, right? And you can just do a thought experiment. Take the development that we have right now and play it out for 100 years. All right, now all the open space is gone. Now what? Right? We've painted ourselves into a corner. Let's use our open space as a way to attract people. That's what other places are doing, and they're successful, right? We have to buy up the open space and create opportunities for recreation. Let's put in climbing facilities. Let's put in bike paths, right? Let's put in trails for horseback riders and all that, and all the economy that goes with it. So I think, you know, the one difference here is that it's not just preserving land, it's preserving land for recreational use. Judy.
And real quick, if I could just add to another point to one of Jeanette's questions is, you know, Jason mentioned the yellow signs, and when the yellow signs go up, it's the 11th hour, and it's almost impossible to protect land once that yellow sign has gone up. So the key is to find out what parcels are available near you that don't have that yellow sign up yet, and start working on those. And Audrey put a link in there for active plans, which is great. I mean, it's crazy how, my understanding is that in Newcastle County, more than 40,000 single family homes, it might be more than just single family, but residential units have already been approved and not yet built by Newcastle County. So what you see out there, there's still 40,000 more that haven't even been built yet, already approved. But I'm going to find the link and put it in there for Newcastle County anyway. If you just Google Newcastle County parcel search, you can pull up the county website and then hone in on your area or an area that you're interested in and find out, you know, if you know of a parcel that's open space, you can go in, see what its zoning is, see who the elected officials are. Once you click through, you can see the county council person for that parcel and the state officials for that parcel, and you can start inquiring about it, or reach out to someone, you know, that might be in the know about it. And not everything can get protected. You know, there's not enough money to do that. Things have to be prioritized. But again, you know, if there is a parcel you're concerned about, do it before the yellow sign goes up. And so I'll try to put that link in the chat.
Just jump in here too. I guess my growing awareness was really with the Hold On to Hercules thing, which is in my backyard. And I just became more aware that county council is the one who does the zoning. I couldn't have told you who my county council person was. I'm learning that, and I learned that just as I, write to, Biden and Carper and Coons and Lisa Blunt Rochester, that the county council person, many of whom are supported by developers, is another place that I can lean on. I can vote for, I can vote against. I can, work on their campaigns. I can do some actions in that particular area. So that's another huge place for, civic involvement. And I thank Dee for being such a leader in this open space thing, because, people just, you think build, money. And it's just not that way. So figure out who your county council, oh, and you have coffees, right, Dee? And
Yeah.
I assume the other ones do as well. I know not so much.
Not that I know of, but you can still
Oh.
contact them.
Call them up and ask them to meet you for coffee someplace, you
Yeah.
know, get on the phone with them. I don't know, Mike, your hand is up, Mike Dunmeyer.
Sure, I guess just a couple thoughts riffing off of what Jason was talking about in terms of highest and best use being preservation. There have been efforts over the years at various points to try to value ecosystem services and natural capital and things like that to be able to actually have a true sense of what the value of open space is as it contributes to benefits of livelihood, to biodiversity, to absorption of carbon dioxide, all of those things. Stanford, I know some years ago, had a lot of money invested in trying to figure this out. I need to look back and see where they got with that. But this is about 20 years ago that people were looking into this heavily. But the other thing I'll mention too, that you've touched on, Jill, and Ted mentioned in the comments, that there are candidates that have run for county council that are more pro green space and things like that. And as you're suggesting, Delaware is a small state, and engaging with your elected representatives does matter and will produce, I think can produce outcomes. But even beyond that, I would say, write checks to support the candidates that are going to, be in favor of the things that you want. Be involved politically. Mention the developers are putting their money behind their candidates. So people like us care about the things we care about also need to invest the money that we have in the candidates that are going to make those kinds of choices. And down here in Sussex County, I think we've got huge numbers of people moving here really for the natural environment. And of course, there's all kinds of sprawl. And the more development that goes on, it really is potentially killing the golden goose. And, so again, I think take the action politically that you can, not just engaging civically, but writing checks.
Thank you.
Can I jump in? I've had my hand raised a bit for a while.
Yes, step away.
Just like this is directed, I believe, to Charles Siskin, who had some interesting comments earlier, but does not have his actual name up. He is at a space called Cheryl, and I would like to hear from him if he's still around a minute, because I did not get his connections. And if he's still here, I don't know if he realized
It is Cheryl, Linda, Cheryl Siskin. She's here.
Then who is Charles Siskin?
I'm sorry.
It's Cheryl.
That's me. I was on the phone call.
Okay, so the person's whose picture was up was someone else, and I'm very confused. And I thought I was using
That was Cheryl, Linda. That was Cheryl.
Okay.
Hi. Yeah. Hi.
Right. All right. So I
Mute
misunderstood
yourself.
completely. Cheryl, and you're a planner with 20
Yes.
years experience and some good information.
Well, my planning experience, my planning days are the 1980s, but I think a lot of it's still relevant, because actually we were planning for 2020 a lot of the time in the academic world of planning school. It was pretty interesting. Now here we are. And one of the things we predicted was that there would be more work from home. And we had discussed, some of my colleagues and I discussed how that had been delayed before COVID. Like, we really thought it would have happened by now. And then COVID happened. Like, from our planning horizon, we had predicted it would happen around the turn of the century. So we were a little off.
Well, thank you. And thank you for straightening me out.
I think that quarter lot zoning and half acre zoning are like the bane of our world. And we have so much excess capacity in the roads. And another thing is, people have had this awakening about the value of nature. We have hit the tipping point, I believe, and there is going to be more and more value. When I was a developer for a couple of years, we sold lots that were abutting open space for more money. So I convinced my developer to save more trees. It was easy. I said, it'll cost you $5,000-$10,000 to work around that tree, but you'll be able to charge 3 lot premiums of $10,000 each for the adjacent lots, whatever. It didn't matter what argument I needed. I just started saving trees back then. And one of the things I would love to do, and I don't know how to get this project off the ground, is I think we should start an urban tree planting program, and to the maximum extent possible, figure out how to plant trees in the city of Wilmington.
If you
I don't live there
lived
anymore,
in
but
Wilmington for some of that time, you've known there have been various times when there were campaigns like that. And we need more of it.
The Delaware Department of Ag also has a campaign right now to plant 1 million trees in Delaware. I don't know what the time horizon is, but if you go just Google Delaware Department of Ag, you'll see their 1 million tree campaign or something like that. And they also have a tree grant program to help communities plant more trees. They'll give you free trees. So that's on there for the Googling. I just want to add too that, I mean, maybe all of you here tonight get it, but I will tell you that the public in general is afraid of the word density. And so when you start talking about more dense development, what I think the trick is, everyone freaks out, and I get it, but I think the trick is that when that density happens, there has to be corresponding open space preservation. And that's not what's happening right now. So what I'd love to see in Newcastle County is some sort of, like you do it in Sussex on a voluntary basis, but where the developers have to put money in to a pot where, so if they develop 100 lots, they put in $1,000 a lot to an open space fund that then is used to protect property. Because right now,
I love that.
that's not going on. So even when density is happening, there's no corresponding preservation. And I think that's one of the pieces we're missing. So Peg.
That's a great point, Dee.
Peggy, go ahead. Unmute, Peggy.
Thank you. Gosh, this conversation is really interesting, and a lot of these points are things that the League of Women Voters has been working on for several decades. But and Dee talked about the study. Well, I think several people have mentioned that it's cheaper to have keep the space open rather than to put development on it. And the Farmland Institute of America, I think that's what they're called, the American Farmland Institute, American Farmland Trust, has done lots of studies in lots of different places, but they find that there is, for every dollar, let me see, I want to get it exact, for every tax dollar, community services for residences cost $1.16. So they're in the hole every time development goes in. It looks good because they get that initial real estate transfer tax and they think, oh man, we're great, our budget is going to do great. But then when they have to start providing services, they don't look down the line and see what's going to happen later, but they're going to have put in roads, and they're going to have to provide schools and school buses and all these different things that are very expensive when you spread them out. So for every tax dollar, residences cost the government $1.16, and open space or agricultural land it costs the community only 35 cents. for services. So it's really a lot cheaper to keep it open.
Can you
Brilliant,
post
Peggy,
that, Becky?
brilliant.
I beg your pardon?
Can you put that in the chat?
Yeah, yeah.
And Jason, I'm jumping off your idea. I mean, this is an idea, and how do we spread that idea? You know, the developers have sort of sold us the bill of goods that everybody, sorry, Emma, everybody needs a big mansion, you know, and it's square foot. And, you know, having recently sold my place at the beach because it was so crowded, you know, it's lot line to lot line. And I keep thinking, you know, where do you put your barbecue? And, you know, that's the concept that's been sold, that everybody needs a single family house. You know, it's the 50s, you know, dream. And now it's, you know, what the developers are still building, you know, the Toll Brothers McMansions. And how do you?
Well, like I said before, I think it starts with this story, right? We're used to hearing the argument being, hey, we should preserve open space because we like it. Oh, but it's expensive. Well, we need to find a way to do it anyway, right? That's the old argument. The new argument is we need open space to remain relevant, right? And then it becomes an economic argument. And then it makes sense, right? And so let's start with the story, because people can't take action until they understand how this is working, right? And so if we can spread the word, and, you know, hopefully those light bulbs start going off. Oh, if we save this land, my property is going to be worth more. If we save this land, we're going to be able to increase our tax base because we're going to make Delaware an attractive place to live, right? It's less about buying homes or whatever. We'll let the market play out as it will, but
Yeah.
let's spread this idea and make sure people understand that, and then from there, you know, everything else will flow.
I love Jason's argument because it's about jobs, and you know, 98% of the politicians out there love jobs. So if you bring them anything that's a job creator, they'll listen. Like, it's trees versus jobs, but Jason's argument turns that around to say, no, it's this is jobs. This open space preservation brings jobs in. It makes people want to move here and work here, and it's an economic development driver. So it's such a great way to look at it. Sorry?
I said, and it's cheap and easy. Yeah. Great. Well, great conversation, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And let's keep this idea going. All right.
Jason, thank you. I think we've had a lively conversation, and I think we can take your ideas. Have you spoken with the Ollie folks?
Not yet, but I'd love an introduction.
Okay, there's an idea for some people, because there's some movers and shakers. Get on the lecture series here.
Great.
Okay, so thank you.
Thank you,
guys.
Jason. Thank you, Jason. So happy to
Really
hear
good.
you.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank
see
you.
On March
good night.
20th with Emily. Okay.
Thanks so much, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a good evening.
Don't log off yet.
Why?
Because I'm still trying. I'm very slow and I just want to be in the chat. There we go. Thank you. I'm very slow at typing.
Okay, Linda. Bye.
Bye-bye.